If you have ever wondered what kind of animal you are in the animal kingdom, today we are going to share with you how to discover your animal archetype and then correlate that with your personality to help you discover your strength and your weaknesses and how you can use that to create the life of purpose and success that you want. If you notice in the Bible, God usually referred to himself as a lion and an eagle. Today we are going to discover more of the reason why that is and how all of these phenomena can actually help in transforming your life. Welcome to the Preferred Mind Podcast, guys. It is your host again, Samuel Oladeji. And here with me is Eric G. And Eric G is going to be talking to us about animal archetypes, your personality, with comparing that with animals, and how that can be applied in a practical way to get you discover your weaknesses and your strength. All right, Eric, could you give us a brief introduction about yourself and then your animal personality test program?
Well, I'm not an animal expert, but I am a personality expert. I
Right.
owned an education and company for about a decade, and we use this personality typing methodology with our company to work with about 1,000 students a year, and it helped a lot, including with my teachers. Taught my teachers how to personality type themselves, so
Hmm.
that they could learn how to personality type their students
Right.
and understand the conflict and differences and potential conflicts within those personalities, so that they could work with them better. And I did that for once again a decade, and I wrote a book, and that was recently published last year during the spring. That basically teaches people, when you read this book, you will learn how to understand the people around you better by figuring out what animal personality type they are.
Awesome. Awesome. That's powerful. And so, like he clarifies, he's on the personality side of the coin and not really an expert in animals, but he has enough information to be able to tell you which animal you belong to and how that correlates with your personality and all that. So let's get into it, Eric. Now, what is animal archetype and how does this correlation with personality and animals, how does it correlate? What is the value from it?
I think there are a lot of different personality types out there, or personality type methodologies out there, right? If you just
Right.
go into a bookstore, you'll find tons of books about it. Even though you should buy one book, which is mine. But and like at the end of the day, it's about remembering and really identifying. So that's why I chose to use animal archetypes, because I think they're fun. Like everybody wants to, animals are fun versus like
Mhm.
four-letter codes and all that technical jargon. And I
Right.
think it's really a good way for people to really connect, in terms of, like, if you tell someone, "Oh, you're a shark," they'll be like, "Oh, I know what that is." It's just a really great shortcut to be like, "Oh, okay, sharks are kind of narrow focus, aggressive, straightforward, direct, blunt." Versus if you say someone is an owl, I think people know what an owl is. And so that's kind of why I chose the animal archetypes. I think we instinctively are drawn to animals in general. And I think, just, with not decades, but centuries and millennia of culture that we've developed, where societies have grown up thinking about these archetypes, I think makes it a very quick shortcut for people.
Oh, that's amazing. And so, if I understand you clearly, you chose this because it creates a memorable experiences for people. And then, one thing that you can memorize, they say when you connect an experience to a story or something, it helps you to remember it better and better. And I can see how having that animal aspect, for example, people who have pets, dogs and cats and everything, there are certain things that those animals show off as their features that you never forget because it's just so hilarious and there's something about them that makes you remember them a lot. So that resonated with me a lot.
It's like Chinese New Year is coming up, and I always think of the Chinese. I mean, I am Chinese or Chinese American, and I think of
Right.
the zodiac, and it's like going to be the year of the snake. I
Right.
think that those kinds of things are, centuries old, archetypal ideas that, yeah, are really easy to connect to.
That's powerful. So now could you take us much more deeper into what your system looks like
Hmm.
and how do you How are you able to discover people and attach them to a particular animal type to help them describe their personality?
Yeah, like it all started once again in my education company. You start seeing the differences in students and
Hmm.
you start realizing that it's a lot easier to connect with what they want versus trying to make them want what you want, right?
Right,
Like that
right,
just seems like putting a what do they call a square peg into a round hole. And
right, right.
so what I found is that you can separate individuals into four different, I call them packs, just
Hmm.
because I use animals, right? So four different personality packs, and each one of them, those packs has a priority, like a general core value
Hmm.
that they desire. And once again, if you belong to this pack, it doesn't mean you don't want anything that this pack wants. It just
Right.
means that you're going to prioritize this one first. Um, and then within those four packs, there are four animals. So four times four makes 16 different personality types.
Right.
But if you share a pack with another animal personality type, you're going to share a same core value, and you're going to start seeing a lot of different or a lot of similarities between
Mm-hmm.
you and the other person, while the way you go about getting that core value might be a little different. For example, one of the packs I call gatherers, kind of like hunter gatherers, right? We have gatherers, we have hunters, we have shamans, and we have smiths.
Right.
And each one values something differently. About half the population is made up of gatherers. So that's also really important to understand that I think a lot of gather values get pushed onto the majority of the population when that's not true. Like they value safety and security. So you can imagine that's like one of the core values that is pushed on us in most
Right.
civilizations, right?
Right.
Tradition, follow what came before, follow what we know, do the tried and true. And that's great. But there's like, half the population that don't value that as highly. And I think it's important to acknowledge those people as well so that we can start really connecting with who we are and how to best reach our full potential.
I think what I understand now is that you have a four different categories of these types of animal archetypes. Now, out of those four categories, there are four extra, types of animals then in each of those categories, which make you have 16 type of animal,
Mm-hmm.
you said. And
Mm-hmm.
each of these categories have different value system that governs their life, their decisions, and everything that controls them. That's correct?
Correct. No, that's yeah, exactly right.
Okay, sounds good. Now, what is the value? What is the major representative of each of those segments, those four groups? Now, you said some are gatherers, and so what is the four group of them? What's their team? And as well, what is the values that each of them possess?
So the gatherers value safety and security. That's number one. So
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine I don't want to say that's typical, but that's the core value of most civilizations, as I
Right,
mentioned before.
right,
Like, but a third of the population are made up of what I call hunters, and hunters value excitement.
right.
And they value by excitement, I don't just mean like getting quick jollies. I just mean like they want to experience every sensory experience they can in the world. They want to taste everything, see everything, smell everything, hear everything, feel everything. And I think that's, not as superficial as it seems from the outside, right? But if you think about that, those two packs alone, right?
Mm,
To the value of safety and security versus visceral excitement are conflicting values, right? Like I
exactly.
think,
Right,
someone who wants excitement will be like, I want to get tossed around on a roller coaster because it makes me feel like I'm going to die. I know I'm
right,
not going to die probably, but the fact that I might is kind of
right.
exciting. Whereas someone who values safety and security will just be like, why would I ever want to die? Like I want the exact opposite of that. I want to feel like
Exactly.
comfortable. And to think of those two making up about 85% of the population, that's
100%.
a that's a very common conflict, right?
Right.
Um, and then we have the shamans and the smiths. The
Mm-hmm.
shamans value self-knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
so their major desire is they want to learn more about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the smiths value information, so they just want to get as much data as they can about the world at large.
Mm. So, in terms of professions, what professions do you think now will resonate with this type of animal archetypes? Because I believe that would help people to be able to visualize it more and more. Because we have an innate knowledge of what each profession does and what kind of values and skills that you need to function in that
Hmm.
profession. And now I know that entrepreneurs are people who are very curious. Most times they are curious, they want to learn new things, and that is how they discover problems that they can solve. I mean, they have a little bit of the other aspects too, but I feel like curiosity is one major thing, because curiosity is what leads to discovery and inventions and all those kind of stuff.
That's why I use the hunters, gatherers, shaman, smiths metaphor, because once
Hmm.
again, that's an archetype, right? And when you
Right.
think of like a village back in the day,
Hmm.
we needed people in those roles. But of course, what did we need more of? We probably needed more gatherers, right?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of things that we had to gather, right? There's a lot of
Right.
crops.
Hmm.
Whereas hunters, we also needed quite a bit of hunters, but hunting is dangerous and hunters die.
Right.
So all those things explain why the population or that percentage of the population is found in like with those four packs. Like shamans and smiths, you don't need that many of them, right? You only need one person or two people building the weapons, building the tools.
Right.
You only need like one shaman telling us when it's going to rain,
Hmm.
but you need a lot of people to harvest the crops. So, like when you think about that in general for society, gatherers might be like police officers. They might
Right.
join the military. They're
Right.
very commonly in education,
Right.
anything logistical. So if you are a gatherer, your strengths lie in the ability to inspect. They're detail oriented. They make sure everything's organized, put
Hmm.
together with a decent amount of structure. So once again, that can fit into different job
Right.
categories,
Right.
but it's really cool that within those job categories, every personality pack can find a niche. Like I always like to say, like within anything, like let's just say any company, you're going to have the people handling supplies, making sure you got everything you need. But you're also going to have the people who are in sales and marketing, right? And in sales and marketing, there's a lot of risk. However,
Right.
it's also exciting. So hunters tend to do really well in jobs where there's like a risk reward factor where they don't mind hustling. Hunters are born hustlers. They love it.
Right.
They like taking chances. They don't mind coming up empty if they can continue to keep trying. But they do want to be rewarded if they take a risk.
Right.
So when you think of like firefighters or fighter pilots
Hmm.
or anything where there's a lot of action, um, and maybe not necessarily a structured schedule. Of course, gatherers, as you can imagine, since they like safety and security, they like a comfortable schedule. They like the
Structure.
9 to 5. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or if they don't get a 9 to 5, even if they get the graveyard shift, they're like, yeah, give me the graveyard shift, but I need to know that I have the graveyard shift these 5 days out of the week, and I'm going to
Hmm.
have it for at least a few years so I can
Hmm.
plan my life around that.
Right. Right.
Where hunters just, they're like, yeah, I'll work
Go with the
whenever,
flow.
yeah, give me like 12 hours at a time, but then you better give me like 2 days of vacation, right? They're play
Right.
hard, work hard.
Hmm.
Um, so that would define those two categories. It's like there's a lot of jobs within those categories, but if you think of what they like, that really will kind of get you to your spot. The story I always like to tell is I have my cousin's kid. I was shucking oysters with him over New Year's, and he's a hunter, right? But he went to pharmacy school, and he's just about to graduate pharmacy school. And I'll be honest, being a pharmacist is not the greatest job for a hunter, and I'm going to explain why. So he's about to graduate, and I asked him like, oh, like what do you want to do now? And he's like, I don't know, as long as I don't have to stay in the same place all day long. And I'm like, that's kind of what a pharmacist does generally is they stay in the same place, they have a set schedule, and they do their job. And I was like, well, maybe you want to try pharmaceutical sales because pharmaceutical salespeople, reps, they move all around the country, they travel, they get to talk to different people, meet different people, they got to hustle, right? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to waste the time I spent learning all this stuff in pharmacy school. And I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, but you know what? You only have one life. So would you rather waste that doing something you don't want to do?
Right.
And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good point. So that's the story I always tell to better explain that dichotomy.
Wow. So what about the shamers? What are they known for? What kind of job description would that be for them?
Shamans love self knowledge, right? And they also love to help other people learn about themselves.
Hmm.
So I hate to say like spiritual roles. I mean, spiritual roles definitely play a part in shamans, but I don't want to say that every shaman is spiritual or religious or has to do something in that realm. But that is
Right.
something very akin to what they love doing. counseling, therapists, psychology, like things where they are interacting with people in a way that is not necessarily logistical, but more empathic. They tend to have a great sense of empathy. So anytime where they have to understand people, read people, education is also um, another sector that they love joining. And
Right.
it's fun because you get to see the conflict between gatherers who are also in education and shamans because they agree on a lot of things, but they also disagree on a lot of things.
Thanks.
So if anyone's ever seen the movie Dead Poet Society, I
Mm.
know that's a deep cut, but if anyone's ever seen that, that's a great example of how shamans and gatherers have a difficult time interacting in a school setting because of, obviously the gatherers love tradition and they love following what came before because it's safer. But shamans are all about discovering new things because discovering new things helps them discover themselves, or at least they feel they're on the path to discovering themselves. So thus, you're going to get a clash when you're dealing with those two personality packs.
What about the last one? The information guys. What's their name?
The Smiths.
The Smiths. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Smiths, because I think of blacksmiths back in the day creating tools, right? And
Right,
and people
right,
who seek information, information is just a tool to make the world better.
right,
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that Smiths are always focused on making the world better. Oftentimes, they just like the information, and the cool thing for them is like if it can help them make the world better, that's great, And so they're the data seekers. Some of them are a little bit more pragmatic and only
mhm,
seek data that they think they can use. A
mhm,
lot of examples of a Smith might be Thomas Edison, or Elon Musk or Nikola Tesla, like people who are really tied into objective information gathering. However, they might not necessarily be the best at understanding people. Because once again, objective information is not like people are subjective, right? So I always think of the character Spock in Star Trek, where he knows the logical aspect of things, but in other realms, especially in understanding human emotion, or I guess I should say just emotions, because it's
right.
not just humans in Star Trek, he has difficulty. So that would be a great example of a Smith.
That means they are creative minded people.
Yes, they are. I think every personality can create. I
Right.
think it just depends what their priority is. I always use like writers as an example. You can pull a writer from every single category. Like I'm just going to give you four off the top of my head: Jane Austen, Hemingway, Tolstoy, and Ayn Rand. Four very different people, four very different personalities, but they're all writers, but they're all writing for a different purpose. Ayn Rand is the Smith. She's very objective. She's trying to push this philosophy forward. It's a very kind of, I want to say cold, but it's a very objective
Right.
philosophy, impersonal maybe. Tolstoy is the shaman, he's very empathic, he's getting deep into what characters are feeling.
Mhm.
He's not particularly concerned with what's going around the characters. Like he's not very plot driven. I really feel like Anna Karenina is basically a woman cheating on her husband and a guy getting married to a young girl that he thought he was in love with. Pretty simple plot. But when you get into interdynamics of the characters, that's what makes it interesting. Of course, you got Hemingway, the hunter.
Mhm.
He's interested in what's going on, like around him, like, fishing boats, bullfighting,
Right.
war. And then, of course, Jane Austen, the gatherer, is focused on society at large. So her knowledge of details
Mhm.
and the little intricacies is really valid to what she's writing about. And I know, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but I'm just saying,
No,
like, when it comes to creativity, like we can all connect with it. We just need to connect with it in our own way.
that makes a lot of sense now. So what are the various animals that are in these four categories?
Well, we take the gathers.
Hmm.
There's the stags, the beavers, the elephants, and the bears. And I know people are like, "Whoa, those are four random animals." But like they have a purpose, and I always separate the within the pack.
Hmm.
There are actually two categories within the pack. You could separate the four animals like this,
Right.
and then you could separate those two out. So gatherers, since they seek safety and security, how you could split them apart is they seek it in different ways. So a stag and a beaver, stags and beavers, they seek it through doing their duty. Like whether they feel like it's their obligation as a parent or their obligation, whatever their occupation is, that's what they follow. They follow what they think they should be doing because they want to serve society at large. Whereas elephants and bears, they get safety and security through their family. So they are very family first. You
Oriented.
know, they're very family oriented. Yeah, they will protect their family at all costs. They will build their family. And the example I give in the book is if you go to a parent teacher conference, right? And if your parent is a gatherer, right?
Hmm.
And the teacher tells your parent, like, hey, like he hasn't been doing a great job. He hasn't been following these rules. He's been misbehaving. If you have a stag or beaver parent, they will almost always side with the teacher. 100%. They won't be like, they're not going to protect you. And it doesn't mean they don't care about you, but in their mind, it's their duty as a parent to make sure that you become a fine, upstanding citizen and follow the rules and do what you're told. And so in their mind, they're like, no, no, we're going to side with the teacher. And
Hmm.
they're like, no, I'm going to make sure my son or daughter gets it right. I'm going to discipline them at home.
Right.
Versus bears and elephants, since they're so family oriented, it doesn't mean that they're going to automatically side with their kid, but they might kind of say like, oh, it's my fault. I've been coming home from work late, or I haven't taught him the right way. Let me work on that at home. Like they might protect their kid in that way. And that's like a really good distinguishing
Balance.
feature
Right.
between the two gathers, right? Like, because I'm sure we've all been to parent teacher conferences, and we all know how our parents reacted upon our teachers disciplining us, and
Right.
different reactions, different strokes for different folks, right?
My mom will probably be the one to pick me, not support me one bit.
And that's it's good and bad, right? There's always like the good thing I always say is like those gatherers, like let's say you go to go home or go to college and then you come home, right?
Right.
Like they're going to be the ones who are like, oh, why are you home? They're not going to be very smothering, because they're going to be like, hey, even though I do care about my kid, I also realize that they need to develop a life of their own. They need to be their
Exactly.
own person. So
Hmm.
they actually will give you your space.
Hmm.
Generally, they won't smother. They won't get involved in stuff, especially if you tell them not to get involved. They generally won't.
Right.
Of course, the bad side is sometimes at their worst, kids can maybe feel a little disconnected with those parents, or
Hmm.
they can feel like they're a little mean or a little overly strict.
Right.
And on the flip side, elephants and bears, you'll never, if you're a child of an elephant or bear, you will never not feel loved. They are so like affectionate and warm. Of course, once you get a little older, that warmth and affection can feel very smothering, right? And they're going to be
Sure.
the one who's like, no, no, don't go away for college. No, stay home, stay close to home. Don't like they're going to get involved in all your social business.
Right.
So, good and bad, right?
There's one side to it. No one is a perfect piece.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right. So what are the other ones?
Oh, so let's say we have the hunters, right?
Hmm.
You can split those up in two different ways. And that's why I'm always saying it's important to understand the personality packs first before
Hmm.
you think of the individual personality types, because, they're going to be different, but different in their own way, depending on their personality type or personality pack. So, as opposed to the gatherers who sought safety and security, hunters seek excitement. So we're not going to split them up based on how they view safety and security. We're going to split them up based on how they view excitement or how they get excitement, right? And so
Exactly.
we have the foxes and sharks. And foxes and sharks are over here. They're part of the hunters, and they get their excitement through adrenaline. They love risk. They love like just that feeling that they could lose or they could win. Which makes them great gamblers or bad gamblers, depending on how much practice they get. You know, um, they love that action, right? And the flip side, we have the peacocks and the butterflies over here, and they get their excitement from consumption. So they love to like go to nice restaurants, eat really different foods. The question I always ask is, do they? If I think someone is part of this personality type, I always confirm it by asking, "Oh, do you like wine tasting?" And if you are a butterfly or peacock, almost every peacock or butterfly is going to say, "I love wine tasting."
One
Right?
thing.
It's just that's like that idea of savoring the most of what life has to offer. That would be the peacocks and butterflies. So you can see, obviously, they're very similar,
Hmm.
but different in how
Right.
they. I always
You have
say
their
the foxes
unique
and
perspectives.
right. Foxes and sharks are going to be the ones who want to go on the roller coaster and get thrown around. They might want
Hmm.
to skydive, right?
Right.
Where peacocks and butterflies, they're going to want to, once again, go to the nicest restaurant or go to a concert and listen to music or dance. Um, and so, two very different things. And, at their worst, because I always think with personality types, it's always good to know what you are at your worst so you can work on that, right?
Right.
Um, and at their worst, foxes and sharks, because they are gamblers and they like taking risks, they can maybe take a little too many risks. They can be a little bit reckless, especially if they haven't learned how to take the right risks. And that's why it's so important. And this is why I taught my teachers this for my education company. If we grow up having teachers, most teachers being gatherers, and they're trying to teach kids how to play it safe,
Hmm.
that doesn't work with hunters. You can't teach them how to
No,
play it safe.
no,
You
they'll be
got to teach,
frustrated.
right, exactly. You're basically telling them what their strength is
Right,
totally worthless,
right,
right?
right.
They need to be taught how to take risks, but how to take smart risks,
Smart risk.
right? So that way when they grow up, and the stakes are a lot higher.
Hmm.
They will be like, the firefighter, right? Obviously, fighting fires is really risky, but someone's gonna have to do it. Someone's gonna have to go in there, and who's gonna be the best person to do that? Generally, a hunter, especially one that has learned how to take the right risks in any
Exactly.
situation.
So what
Um,
I see there is that the distinct differences between them is their level of risk tolerance. So they both
mhm.
like risk, but some like wild risk, like risks that can actually take you out of this herd. And some like risk that I just think you get embarrassed, that's all, and then it's kind of fun and stuff like that.
Yeah, like yeah, like I think of like foxes and sharks as being those action-oriented people.
Mhm.
They're always like the action hero in a movie. Or sales. They're a lot in sales because once again, sales is risky, you
Right,
know.
right.
Whereas the peacocks and butterflies, so their weak point is since they get excitement through consumption,
Hmm.
their weakest point is they might overconsume.
Right.
So they might be alcoholics, drug
Hmm.
addicts,
Hmm.
sex addicts,
Hmm.
because they just can't get enough.
They can't
And
get it.
yeah, and peacocks once again, they love excitement and they love attention. They get a lot of their excitement through like people looking at them. And so once again, a lot of peacocks are actors or performers. I think of like Kevin Hart or something, right?
Hmm.
Like just out there and creative and just doing their thing. But of
Right.
course, you can get overly consumptive and you can be
Hmm.
that person, that annoying friend that we've all had who's really fun to be around until they get to a point where they're not fun to be around because they're always just like me,
Too
me,
much.
me. Look at me.
Right.
Yeah, they're a little much. Yeah. So, once again, strengths and weaknesses, right?
For the shamans, then, what kind of animals do we have in that category?
So so shamans seek self-knowledge.
Hmm.
So we have the dolphins and the pandas over here, and
Right.
we have the baboons and the humpback whales over here.
The
And
humpback?
the humpback whales, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, and we could split them up as to how they seek that self-knowledge.
Hmm.
So um, dolphins and pandas, their self-knowledge strengthens. So their focus is through people.
Mm.
They learn about themselves by interacting with people, and that's their first priority. They're people oriented.
Hmm.
Whereas the baboons and humpback whales are principle oriented. So they're big on ethics, they're big
Right.
on morals. I wouldn't say morals in terms of rules, but I would say, yeah, I'd say ethics, more like philosophical ideas.
Mm.
And once again, both animals or both sides of the coin are gonna be interested in both things. Like obviously,
Right.
shamans are people and ethics people, but
Mm.
when it push comes to shove, those are the sides they're going to choose.
They're going to choose.
So yeah. So the example I always give for shamans, and I give it in the book as well, is that if you have a teacher who has this really cool curriculum that they're using and it's really working, and the principal comes up and says, you know what, you can't do this anymore because it doesn't follow the rules. And I know it's working, but you just can't do it. If you are a people oriented shaman and you're that teacher, they will compromise.
Right.
They will be like, well, okay, like I know this is working, so I'm going to try to adjust it as much as I can and try to keep some of the same stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm going to compromise because I need to be around people.
Hmm.
And if I get fired, I'm not going to be here to help these kids. So, in that sense, dolphins and pandas are a little bit more pragmatic as well. They realize if they stand for the principle, they're going to probably get fired. So, they're going to try to adjust,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, they want to be around people
Right.
to work with them. On the other side, the ethics-oriented shamans, they'll be like, "Screw that! I'm gonna do whatever I want. This is what's working. I believe in this. I believe in
Right.
this.
Right.
What I'm teaching."
Hmm.
So On the good side is they look really courageous, right? Like they look like, you know, you're Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was a baboon. You
Mhm.
know, they're the ones who like will fight for their principles and take the punishment. Once again, if they're in that situation, they might get fired. There's a high
Mhm.
probability that they get fired, and thus they're not there to help the kids anymore. So, you know, depending on what side you fall on, you know, they're gonna like one or the other. You know, I think one will be seen as pragmatic, but the only problem is pandas and dolphins also might be seen as a little bit weak,
Great.
right? Because they're kind of giving up some of their ideals. At least they see that in themselves. I'm not saying they are, but they know that they would have compromised, and thus they aren't happy about it, and then they start feeling guilty and they start self-loathing. Um, so that's their weak point. Whereas on the other side, they can come off as like once again really confident.
Likable.
They stood on principle, so they have no problem with that. But once again, since they do that and they stand on principle so often, they might not always be the easiest to be around, and they might
Mhm.
be a bit lonely, right? They might find themselves often on the outside.
Right.
So
That makes sense. What
yeah.
about the Smith? What do we got on?
Oh, the Smith, the last ones, information, right? So we split
Mhm.
them up based on information, right? How do they get their information? What do they do with that information? And the animals that we have in the Smiths are we have the killer whales and the spiders over here, and we have the chimpanzees and the owls over here. And killer whales and spiders, they want information so that they can use it.
Right.
Chimpanzees and owls, they want information because they think it's cool. So
Takes a lot
I
of.
know that seems odd, but yeah,
Yeah.
you meet a chimpanzee and an owl, and they'll pretty much say that same thing. You'll be like,
Mhm.
why do you want to learn about? Why are you reading that book about like deep cut economics? And they're like, I don't know, it's
It's
cool. I don't know,
fun.
it's fun. Yeah, like they would be considered quote unquote nerds, right? They're the ones who
Mhm.
have fun doing things that maybe other types might think of as being
Sorry.
kind of nerdy, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, so yeah, they're over there and they just want information because it's fun. And like you might have like a chimpanzee who loves like creating different things. They
Mhm.
might shoot out like 1,000 different ideas, and 999 of them will be absolutely ridiculous. Like they'll be like, oh, let's just build a car and put a pinwheel on the back. And people are like, why? And they'd be like, oh, why not? Like, I don't know, maybe it'd be kind of fun. I don't know. Let's see what happens, right?
Right.
And so that probably is not the best idea. That might be one of the 999. But
Mhm.
what if the one in 1,000 idea that they say is, oh, you know what's be cool? What if we took a computer and took a phone
Mhm.
and we just mashed the two together? What do we put a
On
computer
this.
in a cell phone?
Right.
And someone might be like, what? That's ridiculous. And then once again, then they create the iPhone, right?
Right.
So everyone has their purpose. The killer whales and the spiders over here, they tend to be more of the CEO types
Mhm.
because they focus on the information that they can use.
And they use it to
Uh,
execute.
I'm sorry?
They execute with it.
Yes, and they execute it, right? So once again, yeah, chimpanzees and owls, they might get into their own heads a little bit and like, they might not be the most useful. So it takes often takes a killer whale or a spider to be like, okay, that's great information. I'm gonna take that and let's build a company based on that. Okay. Let's like make it happen. In the book, I use the comparison between Edison and Tesla because Tesla was over on this side, right? He loved ideas, he loved coming up with new stuff and modeling and experiments and stuff. He was a chimpanzee, you know. Was he the most practical or pragmatic? No.
Probably not.
Like he I think he died on the top of a roof watching pigeons, I believe, tending to pigeons. That was where he died. Where Edison, he's a killer whale. He not to say that he wasn't brilliant in his own right. He was brilliant, right? But for him, he was like, well, that's a great idea, but how can we use it? How can we put it into actual usage?
Right.
Because if we don't, then it's not going to have any impact. And killer whales and spiders are all about having impact on the world. And obviously, I mean, Edison had a huge impact, of course, clearly. So,
So how do you then think that people can take this information and knowledge about this animal archetype and apply it to their personal life to discover their strength and weaknesses and then use it to, transform their life basically?
well, it depends how you're feeling about your life right now. Like, and it also depends on what stage of your life, right? Like, if you're middle age and you have a job,
Mhm.
and let's say you've had that job for like 5 or 10 years, and if you're not particularly satisfied with it, then I think personality typing is really great because it might give you the answer to why you're not particularly satisfied. A lot of times, especially gatherers make up half the population, as I had mentioned before. So their value of safety and security, it's a known thing. Like teachers tell them it's what they should be doing. They want it. So in a sense, they grow up thinking the way they view the world is correct, right? Because and it just gets like reinforced throughout school, right? Now that's really great, and that means that generally speaking, they're not going to have necessarily any identity issues or confidence issues when they're younger, because for the most part,
You know, yeah.
society reinforces. Yeah, they know who they are, and society reinforces that. However, if they haven't reflected on what they're doing, really reflected on whether they like it or not, they might get a job and be in that job for 20 years. And by the time they get to 40, they're like, I don't think I like what I'm doing. Why not? Why don't I like what I'm doing? Why am I unhappy? And I think personality typing and finding out what your personality type is can really help to maybe find a job, maybe within your same sector, that might be more applicable to you. Especially if you're a gatherer, because if you're a gatherer and you're an elephant, elephants are warm, friendly people. They're really good with people. But let's say you've been put your whole life, you've been an accountant. Not to say that accountants don't interact with people, but let's say you're an
Right.
accountant in the back room just crunching numbers. That might not necessarily be the job for you, but something maybe within that company might be great for you. Like maybe you could get transferred to HR, if you're an elephant, and vice versa. If you're a beaver, which is another gatherer, beavers are great accountants. They don't necessarily always love dealing with people because they feel like people are a little overly dramatic. So they're definitely not going to want to deal with all the drama that's in HR, right?
Right.
So if you're in HR and you're a beaver, maybe you
Probably
want to
not the
get into
right place.
accounting, right? Go the other way, right? And I think that's one of those things where I always tell people, the midlife crises or having a midlife crisis is generally has to do with being a gatherer,
Hmm.
because I'll be honest, like a shaman, look, I'm a shaman myself, and I
Hmm.
always say shamans don't have midlife crises because you know what? For a shaman, their whole life is kind of like a midlife crisis because they're always questioning themselves, right? Because
Right.
self-knowledge is what they want. So like,
Right.
oh my God, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. I don't know. And they do that their entire life. So by the time they get to 40, they're just like, no, I constantly do this. But for a gatherer, they're just like, this is the first time I'm feeling any bit of
Think
insecurity
like
about who
that.
I am.
Right.
So yeah, in a very long-winded way, in a very long-winded answer,
Hmm.
that's definitely how personality typing can help people in their personal lives, especially if they're dissatisfied with their job or in their relationship. It might help to understand why.
Hmm. I think that is very well put because, sometimes we don't really get to know what our struggle is or what we are feeling like, particularly until we actually take that inner self reveal. And for the
Mm-hmm.
shamans who does that practically every day, that is not a new thing. So there's nothing like crisis for them. And it shocked me. Now I'm someone who does a lot of personal reflection. I basically do not I'm not the people pleaser kind of person. I follow a set of principles and values that I set for myself. And I don't mind that being questioned sometimes, but I try to make sure I'm doing the right thing and I'm doing the what is necessary and I'm being true to myself, to my values and to my principles. And sometimes when I see some people that they reach certain stage of their life and they're like, whoa, how do I get here? I'm like, dude, are you for real, man? You don't take any review about your life? Like, Jesus Christ, what have you been doing with your life?
Yeah, it's funny, right? It's like, and it shows the difference in personalities, right? Like where
Right.
one is like, this is my priority. This is like
Mhm.
something that I've done my whole life because this is something that I naturally do because it's what I want to do. And for the
Right.
other, it's like, oh, is that something important? I didn't know that, and vice versa, right? Like,
Yeah.
like a hunter is really conscious of how they appear, right? Because they want
Mhm.
people to like them and they want
Right.
people to like them, and they're very like surface based, right?
Mhm.
But if you're a smith, Smiths don't care oftentimes how like they look and the outward
Right.
influence. So they'll be like, "Oh, is like fashion important? I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Right.
Like I don't know, like you know."
So yeah, the personality test can actually help you understand different people as well. So that's another
Mhm.
practical angle. Like I told you, when I see some people and that they are going through crisis and stuff, I'm like, dude, what were you thinking all your life before you got here? Like seriously, man. So it makes me understand that there are different kind of people, and what might seem natural to you is absolutely alien to someone else. They don't even understand that. They've never thought about that before. I said something to somebody one time, and it really struck the person. I saw the person really paused and start thinking about it, and they're like, "Wow, so this and that." I'm like, "Wait a minute, are you for real, bro? This is a natural thing." So this can actually help you to understand people and understand the reason why they act the way they act and think the way they think. So I think aside from helping you in career decision making as well as in your jobs and whatever, I believe this can also help you in communication, with people and in your leadership, especially understanding people and being able to communicate with them so you don't appear as being judgmental or being discriminational, or if somebody come up that way to you, you don't feel timid or get yourself feel discriminated because you understand people are different, and that is why we are all meant to work together. If we are all complete as a whole, the world will be in chaos and disaster because everybody will feel self-sufficient. You have a lot of people who are egotistic and proud and don't cry care about anybody because they feel like I don't need you, and legit they don't need you. But God did not do that because He knows we're gonna kill ourselves at the end of the day if He does that. So it makes us rely on each other, and this personality test and types is what gets you know that okay, well, maybe this is why I do this, and this is why that person, see me weird, or why I see that person strange and weird, because we are just different. We are all humans, the same race, but we think differently. We see things differently. And some of those things is just natural. You're just created that way. Now, there are some of the kind of personality I have that doesn't align with anyone in my family, but I'm just that way.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned family because like it's super important, like understanding, I think a lot, especially with my teachers, when I would teach them this, the
Right.
teachers that were parents
Hmm.
really connected with it because they're always like, oh, like that's why I like this kid more than I like this kid,
That kid, right.
Right, because they probably had a very similar personality to that kid versus
Hmm.
this one. And it started realizing, oh, like, because oftentimes parents think, oh, my kid is going to be a lot like me because I'm going to teach him to
Sometimes
be like
not.
me,
Right.
and it's like, no, oftentimes it's the opposite, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, yes, culture has a part, and like your whatever your family culture is or whatever your ethnic culture is,
Hmm.
that has an influence on what someone experiences, but it
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be that way. The example I always give is like, let's say in traditional Japanese culture,
Right.
it's a little bit more understated. Physical contact is not necessarily a big thing,
Hmm.
right? They're not exactly traditional Japanese, not exactly a hugging culture,
Hmm.
right? But if you get a peacock personality type
Hmm.
born in that culture, it can be a bit difficult because peacocks
Right.
love to touch people. They love to hug, not like in a bad way. They don't like to like, touch people in a bad way, but they just like physical affection,
Right.
right?
Right.
And on the flip side, if you're born in, let's say, Latin culture, which tends to be a lot more
Mhm.
physical in terms of like hugging and stuff, and you're like, let's say, a shark, and you
Mhm.
want your personal space, you're also going to be like, hey, I don't like this. I don't
Right.
like.
Right.
I had a friend who was a shark, and he's Cuban, and
Mhm.
he's just like, I hate when my family keeps like all the hugging and kissing on the cheek. He's like, just like stay away from me. And so it's just funny. Like it's culture doesn't make us who we are. Who we are makes us react to our culture in a certain way.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. All right, guys, this is it on animal archetype, and how this can help you discover your personality and as well as your purpose and unlocking your inner strength of who you are and applying that to your life and again your relationships, like I said the other time. So we discussed about three major archetypes here, which are the gatherer, the hunter, the shaman, and the smith. And within those individual categories they have different values. Some that like to safety and security, some that like excitement, some that like self-knowledge, and some that like information. And I want you to look at this video as a tool for you to learn, for you to discover new things about life, about society, about people around you, and apply this information into transforming your life as well as every other aspect that it might be applicable to you. Our goal here at Proverbial Minds is to see that you are transformed both internally and then externally to achieve that life that you want and you deserve. Eric, it's a really great pleasure to have you here today, and I really enjoyed the conversation and the new perspective on personality types and discovery. I think it's a very refreshing and different aspect to look at it, because I know very well that people get excited when they say, "Oh, what kind of animal do I belong to, or do I have a similar personality and stuff like that?" And again, in the Bible, God really refers himself to the lion and the eagles. And if you look at those two animals, the eagle is mostly known for vision. They have vision, they want freedom, and they are very ambitious. The lion is mostly known for strength, courage, leadership, and those areas. And so it's very, very, very exciting and profound on how the animals and then the humans are interconnected in certain ways. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh no, I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
That's awesome. All right. If you are on the Proverbial Mind podcast for the first time, please hit the subscribe button if you like what you just listened to, and hit notification button so that you can be notified when next we post important and valuable content like this. And if you're returning, I don't know what you're still doing. I don't know why you're not subscribed yet. This is really awesome. And I usually have a good time here. I myself learn a lot of stuff from what we do here. And I want you to transform your life and help us to reach 1 million other people by subscribing to our channel, hitting the notification button, and liking our videos. And also drop a comment down below on what you think about what we do. And feedbacks. If you have testimonies, you can reach us at proverbialminds@gmail.com to share anything, business, whatever it is. You can connect us with that. Also, to mention sponsor for today's video, we have a friend of mine and a partnership that we did with someone who was once a guest on this show, on this podcast. And after we communicated the kind of audience avatar we have, so they are willing to help us by offering you the opportunity to open a program that they do. In this program, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to really transform your company and your business and generate 7 figures, and if you're looking for a way to run your company, maybe you're having bottlenecks in different places, or maybe you want to upgrade your leadership skills, those areas that can help you drive success for your business and your company. Look at the description. There's a link there. You can click that link and sign up for that program. And we know, and this person is a person that I have studied, and I can trust them, and so to give you a valuable product. So do click that link below and sign up for it. If you want to listen to this outside of YouTube, you can always visit our podcast channel at Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify to get the audio version of this recording. On to the next one, guys. It's your host again, Samuel Oladeji. Peace out.